All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Rambling Men Sports Podcast. Got my buddy Steven back. He is not wearing his usual Cardinals colors. He's got the AC pumping. Apparently, he's got his Mike Eruzione 1980 U.S. hockey jersey. Love it, love it. I love it, man.
I haven't busted it out yet. I got it like right at the end of the Olympics this year, and I hadn't busted it out, so I just figured I'd wear it. Like you said, I got the AC blowing in here. It's hot as hell in Alabama, so so it's pumping, and I walked in. I was like, it's a little cold.
Yep.
I might put on a sweater.
I love it, man. America.
All
right, so I got you on. Well, first of all, how you doing? I always forget to ask people that.
No, I'm good, man. It's weird because we talk all the time in our group meetings and things like that. It's just, but I'm good, man. I'm good. Just working, plugging along. Like I said, today we were in court most of the day, but it's good. How you doing?
Doing all right, man. I'm tired. I'm working now, finally.
I feel you on that. It's not fun being a grown-up.
It's bad when, I don't know if you know, but I'm back working at Chick-fil-A just to do a minimum wage job while I'm going to grad school. But it's bad when I'm excited about an 8-hour shift. Like, I don't have to work that long.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, I've been there for sure.
I worked 3 11-hour shifts last week. So, yeah, it was tough.
That ain't fun, bro.
No, it is not. So, I have you on today because the MLB trade deadline literally just ended, what was it? Tuesday night? Tuesday afternoon.
4 o'clock Eastern time, I believe.
And I'll be totally honest, this might be the most eventful trade deadline I've ever seen. A few years ago, it was close. I remember.
Yeah, there's a couple.
Yeah.
That I think the year that CC Sabathia was traded to Milwaukee for that stretch run, I want to say Cliff Lee was traded in that one too. There was a bunch of big name pitchers that went in that one. Maybe those were a couple years.
I think Lee was 2 years later.
Yeah, but those two were big ones.
Yep.
Like I said, there was one a couple years ago where some guys got moved around, but this one was, in recent memory, this is definitely the most eventful.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's like you just mentioned, like there was one big name, obviously that's Manny Machado, but there were some pretty big names in here. We're obviously going to get into them later, but obviously let's start with Machado. He's obviously the biggest name that was traded.
Yeah.
And I think he was traded like right after the All-Star game. That was right after my first day at work, and I was exhausted. I watched the All-Star game. I fell asleep before midnight, which hardly ever happens. And I woke up like at 1 o'clock in the morning. My TV was still on, and I got an alert that the All-Star game had ended, and then I scrolled right above it, Manny Machado traded to the Dodgers. I was like, oh, okay.
It was pretty quick afterwards. I think the official press releases or whatever came out on that Wednesday, that off day between All-Star game and getting everything back going when the Cardinals and Cubs played. But yeah, I mean that's the biggest name. It certainly he's the superstar that everybody thought was going to get traded before the year. That ended up playing a full half season with Baltimore for no reason at all. Like I've talked about before.
Don't trade him. At least have some hope for the season, I guess.
It's whatever. But yeah, he's definitely the biggest name that got moved. But like you were saying, there was some other almost not really secondary stars that got traded, and we'll get into those. Yeah. But there was.
I wouldn't even call them that. I mean, some of these dudes are legitimate all-stars.
Bona fide all-star. There's a bunch of guys that they're flying all over the place. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to kind of delve into.
One thing I want to note is I believe I don't want to say we were the first persons to say it, but we said it here on this podcast that, hey, where do we think Manny Machado could end up? Oh, the Dodgers. They just lost Corey Seager, and sure enough, that's where he is.
It was that one we did right at the beginning of the season, I think.
Roughly,
and maybe it was like right at the end of spring training or whenever they had just lost Corey Seager, and I was like, well, the Dodgers are ones to do this, and lo and behold, they did it. So.
And they didn't just get Machado; they got somebody else bigger. But we can talk about him a little bit later. Anything else you want to mention about Machado? Just it's not really that surprising. We knew he was going to get dealt.
It surprised me the haul that they got for him. They didn't get the top names. They didn't.
Yeah.
Walker Buehler was untouchable for LA. He was probably the only person that was untouchable.
I was a little bit surprised as well. They got the Orioles got their number 4 prospect, and then it was 27, 28. I'm like, man, that seems pretty low.
But if you think about it, I mean, it is like a 3-month rental, it's a half-season rental, so it's not all that uncommon. So I mean, but for a guy of Machado's caliber, it seemed a little low. But then you factor in the contract situation and the fact that he's almost 100% probably going to go to New York in the offseason. It makes sense that they wouldn't give up, their MLB ready top prospects.
Who was the top prospect that you mentioned that was untradeable?
Walker Buehler is his name. He's pitching with some of the injuries they've had. He's pitching for LA now.
Okay.
I'd have to look up his stats, but I think he's having a pretty decent year for his first long-term stint in the majors. But yeah, I think he was the one untouchable guy. Max Muncy was probably up there. Like I said, he's been kind of thrust into some playing time with Turner going down, and Seager going down, and those guys, and them having to kind of patchwork together an infield a little bit. And
I'm glad that you mentioned that. We'll go ahead and segue to the other name that the Dodgers acquired, and that was Brian Dozier. This gives them another infield bat, and I want to ask you something. We talked about this I talked about this with James. This gives them now Cody Bellinger, Max Muncy, Justin Turner, Corey Seager, Manny Machado, and Dozier all in the same infield. Some of these guys play the same positions. Who do you think could be out, this offseason?
Well, Seager's going for the year. So.
I shouldn't say they play the same position. Some of these guys are versatile and can play the other positions.
Yeah. So, like I said, Machado's gone after the offseason unless.
See, but the Dodgers have the money to keep him. That's just a weird situation.
Yeah, the Dodgers do have the money to do it. So you never know, but I would, of that core of people, Machado is probably the first to will probably be the first to leave after the season. He'll be a free agent.
Yeah.
It will be him and Bryce will be getting it. Between the two of them, they'll be getting just a ridiculous amount of money. I don't think Bellinger's going anywhere. I don't think Seager's going anywhere. They're young, and they have controllable contracts. I don't know what Dozier's contract situation is. I'd have to look it up.
I think he still has a year or two because they traded away Forsythe to get him.
I think he's got a year or two left. So it would surprise me if he left because I'm pretty sure he's got one of those more controllable, team-friendly contracts. So I don't know. If you think Muncy is a trade target where they can go out and acquire a starter in the winter, or maybe even a starter at the waiver deadline on August 31st or before that may be something, but I don't think they'll give him up. He's tearing the cover off the ball. So, I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to watch. Because, they're obviously all in to make a World Series push this year. The West has kind of come back to them a little bit. The Rockies and the Diamondbacks have kind of faltered a little bit and have come back to the Dodgers. I think the Dodgers are leading the division.
Last I checked, that was a week ago. They were at least, I think, leading the division a week or two ago.
Let's see.
But not by much, by like a game or two.
Yeah, so they're behind the Dodgers, are a half game back of the Diamondbacks, and the Rockies are also a half game back. So I mean, they're right there. So they're obviously trying to make a push to get back to the World Series and come out on top this time. So it'll be interesting. Like I said, I don't know. I don't know if anybody except for Machado is like a done deal will be gone in before camp breaks next year.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Another team that I'd say was very busy was the Milwaukee Brewers, staying in the NL Central. They acquired both Mike Moustakas and Jonathan. I meant to look this up, but Scoop. I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
Jonathan Scope.
Okay. But yeah, 2 infield bats. They needed guys like him or guys like them.
They needed so they kind of shored up a couple of different places. Third base was one that they kind of. They had a guy who was manning third base in Travis Shaw. They have a couple other guys that can play there. Eric Thames can play there. I'm trying to think of some other guys that they've had, but they kind of just shored it up with Moose. Moose is one of those. He's the first. He's got a year left on his contract. He actually signed a qualifying offer in the offseason, the first person ever to do that. So that was surprising in and of itself. But they kind of shored up. So Travis Shaw, they free Travis Shaw up to kind of move around a little bit, play different spots. He can play corner outfield. He can play first. He can play third. So it'll be. I think we lost here. There we go. I
don't know what the problem is. I think my internet's bad.
Yeah, mine might not be bad. Might not be good either. But like I was saying, they kind of shored up the infield, kind of freed up Travis Shaw, who can play a bunch of different positions, play first, third, corner outfield, places like that. Kind of platoon with Scope if need be at second. Scope can play shortstop if need be. It's just they kind of freed up, gave Craig Counsell, the manager, the option to just play with the lineup a little bit, and they're going after a central title. So, it'll be interesting to watch. I've all but thrown in the towel for St. Louis this year.
That's something else. I want to get your thoughts about the Cardinals firing manager Mike Matheny. I asked you about that a few weeks ago, but I didn't mention it on the podcast.
Yeah. Like I said, when we were texting about it, it was something that needed to happen. I think a change in clubhouse leadership was something that was inevitable. Apparently he had lost the clubhouse to some of the veterans in there. Dexter Fowler being one of them. That has been in the news a lot lately around the Gateway, and it's something that I don't like to see it in the middle of a season. Like I said, it was something that probably needed to happen, but whether that be at the All-Star break like it was, or in the end of the season, it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. So another name that has been dealt. There's so many names here. We don't have time for all of them, but probably I'd say the second biggest name maybe is starting pitcher Chris Archer heading to staying in the NL Central again, going to right up the road here from me, Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah, that was not surprising that he got dealt. It was surprising that Pittsburgh kind of jumped in. I feel like they kind of jumped in real late and kind of overwhelmed them with a package of prospects, and I think like one major league veteran. I'm not 100% sure on that, but Archer's another one of those guys. It's not like a rental that they are waiting, that they want to make a push and just use this guy to make a push. He's got a really team-friendly, controlled contract, especially for
someone told me at work he's still, within his, whatever it is, 6 years you have until you can be a free agent. I think he still has 3 years left.
He's got, I want to say, 3 arbitration eligible years, which for what he is, the stat that everybody brings up when they talk about value is a WAR, and I think his production, his WAR to payroll hit, I guess, ratio is just off the roof because off the charts because his production for what Tampa Bay was paying him was ridiculous, and he's got a super team friendly contract. I want to say it's his last team option is like 2022, so that'll be a whole lot of fun to have him in the Central for the next 3 years. So looking forward to that. But yeah, it was a good deal for both teams. I think Tampa kind of.
Yeah, they've been they've been insanely hot, and now they're at a point where shit, we're actually winning games, and we're supposed to be rebuilding. Let's go ahead and get a guy while we're at it.
Yeah, and they kind of did a little bit of both. They sold off of their most valuable asset.
Yeah.
Probably, looking at Kiermaier, Ramos, who got dealt, and Archer, who are probably their three most valuable assets. So they kind of started, and they got prospects out the wazoo for both Ramos and Archer. So I mean, you look at that and say, okay, they're shutting it down, they're rebuilding, but at the same time, they go out and get Tommy Pham from the Cardinals, and give up 3 prospects for him. And
you talking about the Pirates or the Rays? I'm pretty sure Pham went to the Rays.
Yeah, he did.
Okay, I just thought I thought you were talking about the Pirates. I'm sorry.
I was about Tampa. I'm sorry. But I mean, with the Pirates, yeah, they're red hot, and they're making They said, you know what, we might be able to make a push and sneak into wild card contention, but it also sets them up for to kind of replace what they lost in Garrett Cole.
Yep.
Before the beginning of this year, they get an ace that they have needed since he left, and so it'll be something that pays out for them in the long run. Not only looking at maybe contending, making a push for a wild card spot by the end of the year. It'll set them up for a lot of success with him in the coming years too.
Yeah. I got 2 more names for you I want to talk about before we get into maybe some guys who weren't dealt that we thought might be. One name is, I just had it here. We'll go ahead and say Wilson Ramos, all-star catcher this year, having a pretty good year, heads to the Phillies. My friend James, my co-host James, has said that they needed a bat, and then they got one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did, to kind of bridge.
And not just him, Asdrubal Cabrera as well from the Mets, who's a decent bat.
As well, yeah. So those two, I feel like they're going to kind of bridge the gap from the top of the order, from Trey Turner and Zimmerman and Harper and those guys.
Yeah, that's the Nationals, man. I'm talking about the Phillies.
Phillies. I'm thinking,
well, Ramos used to be in Washington, I believe.
From the top, from Odubel Herrera, Reese Hoskins, those type of folks, it'll bridge the gap with Cabrera, where they needed a second baseman, they needed a catcher. We lost connection again.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
That gap will be bridged that Philly really needed, and it'll be something that Philly's right in the thick of things. If they're not, if not for the East, they're right in the thick of a wild card berth. So that's 2 bats. There's 2 kind of, I wouldn't say they're impact bats, but they're very serviceable and can produce in spots that aren't really high producing spots at second base and a catcher. So it's a big get for the Phillies. They've got the pitching that they need to win in the postseason. Now they've kind of put together a lineup that can compete for sure. Yep. So it was 2 really good pickups by Philly, and Asdrubal Cabrera especially brings a real veteran presence.
Mm-hmm.
He's played in a lot of games in his career. He's played in the postseason. It's a really good veteran presence that him and Jake Arrieta can kind of play off and kind of be that clubhouse leaders that Philly doesn't really have much of because they're a young ball club. So that'll be something that will be kind of maybe not talked about as much, but something that's big that they can kind of lead their teams into playoff contention.
All right, so my last name here is a guy who's not having a very good year, and the Cubs just gambled on him just because of his past, and that is starting pitcher Cole Hamels.
Yeah. The Cubs starting rotation has been a disaster this year outside of John Lester.
Yep.
The Yu Darvish project has got off to a miserable start. So the Cubs needed some starting pitching help, and as somebody with a veteran presence, like I was talking about, a veteran presence, some guy that's pitched in the postseason a lot. The Phillies haven't had as much success as they wanted to have had. Early the late 2010s, late 2000s, early 2010s.
I think you got the team wrong again. I think you said the Phillies. Your mind's all over over the place.
It is, yeah. There's people flying all over the place, and he pitched for the Phillies for forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I said, the Cubs needed to start a veteran starting pitcher that they can rely on to go out, pitch 6 innings, give him a chance to win every 5 days, to back up John Lester, because John Lester is kind of just dragging everybody along. Him and Hendricks is having an okay year, but it's Chatwood is at the back of the order or back of the rotation has not panned out. Of kind of a patchwork lineup or rotation after the top. So Hamels is a big get, as kind of a glue guy for sure. Like I said, with playoff experience, which is always helpful because the Cubs are going to be there. Unfortunately, it'll be back in the end. So I'm, it's. As long as I get the teams right in my head, it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah. Not only do you have to get the teams right, my internet has to really get fixed.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to some of the names that weren't dealt that we thought that were. I'm just going to list them off here. I want to save one for last because it was very interesting the night before. But Matt Harvey of the Reds was a name that we all thought was going to be flipped. Wasn't flipped, according to my brother. The Reds put a lot of feelers out there. Nobody really wanted him.
Yeah, that's not surprising.
Yeah, not really surprising at all. Another name that I thought for sure was going to get dealt was Adrian Beltre. I think he's a free agent at the end of the year. I thought Boston was going to swoop in and he'd be heading back to the Red Sox.
Yeah, that was a name. Also, the Braves, I think, were like they put out some feelers for Beltre and JD, Josh Donaldson, and they didn't end up going with those two. But yeah, Adrian. I mean, he's 3,000 hits. He's a veteran. It's Rangers ain't got nothing to play for, so they could have maybe started a small rebuild with some folks they got for Adrian, but. He's probably going to sign back anyway. So.
You just mentioned his name, but another guy that is going to be a free agent from your neck of the woods, Auburn Tiger, Josh Donaldson. The Blue Jays aren't going anywhere, and he was not dealt. Very interesting.
Yeah, and the Blue Jays probably sold, other than Donaldson, they shipped off their probably most valuable piece in J.A. Happ.
Yep.
So it didn't surprise me that he didn't get dealt, because he was not having a good year, and then he got hurt.
Yeah.
So taking a flyer on a rental on a guy that hadn't played since early May, and even when he was playing, wasn't having all that great a year anyway.
Yep.
Would have been a big ask for a team in contention, which is where he would have gone. So it's not surprising. The Cardinals were linked to him for a while. Probably will be linked to him in the winter when
that'll
contract negotiation comes up. When the free agent season starts. But he and Beltre both aren't having the years that you would want to see in a guy that kind of qualifies as that that rental that can be flipped or traded and push somebody to the postseason.
Yep, and then we don't really have to talk about it, but no surprise, the Mets didn't give away DeGrom or Syndergaard. Not a huge surprise. I wasn't buying that hype from the beginning.
I wasn't really either. They're too talented. They're the cornerstones of that franchise. So
I agree completely. All right. So last but not least, I got this alert the night before, and I know you got some thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Apparently, Bryce Harper was on the trade deadline, and I was like, holy shit. That's obviously huge. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I got the same one. It was super late at night. I think I woke up to it or something the next morning, and I was like, "There's no possible way that Washington trades him."
I found it highly unlikely they were going to anyway.
Yeah, and they were right in the middle of a playoff push. Yeah, he's not having a great year, but he's still freaking Bryce Harper.
Yep.
And what you would get for him to bet that you could sign him back in the winter,
especially with the year he's having, maybe you could try to get him to stay.
I never bought into it once.
I thought it was interesting at least, but I was like, this ain't gonna happen.
I don't know. I didn't even ever hear anybody that was linked to him.
Yeah.
I know the Phillies were talked about at the beginning of the year, but talked about who he would sign with, not who he would be traded to. So yeah, it didn't surprise me at all that it surprised me to wake up to that notification, but at 4 o'clock, the bell ringing at 4 o'clock Eastern and him not going anywhere was not at all surprising.
Yeah, and I one of my buddies at WVU was a big Mets fan, so when that report came out early in the morning, I saw him he got on Twitter and said, I'd rather him leave Washington this offseason and rip the hearts out of Nationals fans instead of trading him at the deadline. And I was like, it's not going to happen anyway. With the year he's having, basically being a rental, I just don't think they're willing to give up, top-notch prospects for that kind of,
Yeah, I mean, he would be the most expensive rental of all time. And I don't think people are willing, even if they need an outfield bat, even if it was an AL team or something that wants a push, I don't think that they'd be willing to give up what he would cost.
Yeah.
Because it would be, if I had to guess, it would probably be 2 or 3 top 10 prospects to take him. Probably would have to include a club controlled major leaguer with him. I mean, it would be a blockbuster deal, and those rarely happen anymore. So, not surprising at all. He'll be the circus will begin around November, December of where he's going to sign. So,
yeah, couldn't agree more. So we basically wrapped it up. Obviously, there are a lot of names out there we didn't get to, but we're kind of pressed for time here. I'm curious to know how you think all these moves shape up for the postseason.
So there were a couple that we didn't talk about that I think are going to have a really big impact on the postseason, and these are kind of my winners and losers of the postseason or the trade deadline. Obviously, the Dodgers are a huge winner. They plugged really, really needed holes in a hospital wing infield that they've got going right now. Another one that I looked at was New York. The Yankees made some deals that they desperately need. They desperately need pitching, starting pitching. They needed one more arm in the bullpen, in a bullpen that's incredible anyway. But they went out and got Zach Britton and almost maybe more importantly kept him from going to Boston or Houston or some other team that needed needed a bullpen arm. The Indians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is one thing I will say is getting Britton is huge. Lance Lynn and J.A. Happ was an all-star. He's not having that good of a year unless he's caught fire the last few weeks since the all-star game.
He hasn't really. No, he's been pitching about the same as he was in Toronto. Lance Lynn, I read, will probably start in the bullpen, and then once he kind of gets settled in New York, we'll move into the back half of that rotation. He's got postseason experience that they can rely on.
He played with the Cardinals, didn't he?
Yeah, he was a Cardinal for a long time. He's made World Series starts. He was a Cardinal for a long, long time, and was an innings eater for us, and was a big part of those teams. But I think that, those two teams making the moves that they did, I think Boston may be on the losing side of it. They needed some help in the bullpen while they can just kind of mash people into oblivion. Help in the bullpen would have helped them kind of distance themselves as the best team in the league.
Yeah, they really didn't do anything. That was a team I was willing to chalk up as a loser. They got Ian Kinsler. If this were 8 years ago, that would be huge. But he's not the same player he used to be.
He's not, no, and they've got a couple guys that play second base. Rafael Devers is their young up and coming star that plays. He can play second and third. Brock Holt is their super utility guy. He plays all over the place and plays a lot of second base, and he's very productive. It's just weird that I ain't got that, but like I said, they're totally fine.
They're fine. Yeah,
best team in the league. Bullpen help would have been the one thing that they could have done to get better. They didn't do it, like I said, but that's okay. One weird thing, the Tampa Bay Rays currently don't have a starting pitcher on their depth chart.
I saw that.
I was looking through it, and that kind of caught my eye, and I was like, They have 11 pitchers right now slotted as bullpen arms, and it's just going to be weird watching them.
That's interesting because that's a team that wasn't really – they weren't struggling. They were kind of in this weird limbo where they're not in a playoff push. They're not struggling. They're, a few games above 500.
Yeah, and now who knows what's going to happen with them. It'll be interesting to watch them patchwork together 9 innings every night. But because they've been a team this year that they started Sergio Romo in a couple of games, let him go a couple innings, an inning or two, and then give the rest of the game to a bullpen or a long reliever or something like that. Yeah. So they've been doing some weird shit with the bullpen anyway. I think the Indians didn't do a whole lot.
That's a team I'd chalk up as a loser.
They got Brad Hand as a closer. They didn't do a whole lot else. They made some minor league trades and switched a couple of guys. They actually made a trade with the Cardinals. Got one of our higher level minor league outfielders.
And that's a team that is really falling behind in the AL, and I'm not sure they could. It's not like they're the Yankees or Red Sox who are right up there at the top of the AL and didn't really need to make a move. They probably could have gotten away with not doing anything and just stay pat. Yeah. But the Indians can't afford to do that.
Yeah, the problem is they're going to win their division, and they're going to win it by 25 games. So you got to think, and they've got two of the better position players in the league that are vying for an MVP this year in Jose Ramirez and Frankie Lindor. And, it's just not a whole heck of a lot they did. They went out and got the thing they desperately needed, which was a closer. Cody Allen has not been performing well, has been injured. Andrew Miller has kind of been down. So they went out and got what they kind of needed. they could have gotten more. They didn't. Like I said, they're going to make the playoffs. I think they know that. I think teams trading with them know that. It's I wouldn't necessarily classify them as a winner or a loser. They were just
there.
They just kind of did what they needed to do and got out. They weren't super active. They weren't really linked to any of the big names. Like I said, it was just if an offer came along and it was a good offer for minor league talent, stuff like that, they maybe pulled the trigger. But after their deal with San Diego for Brad Hand, they shut it down and we're like, we're going to focus on this team on the field and getting this and making a deep postseason run.
There was another team. Oh, another team that I didn't mention them at the top of the AL because I wanted to talk about them separately. Is the Houston Astros. Really didn't do a ton at all. Kind of like the Red Sox. They made one move to get Roberto Osuna, relief pitcher. It never hurts to have arms in the bullpen, I guess. And they really didn't have to make a move.
Yeah, that one's kind of been a one that's in the news lately because Roberto Osuna is currently suspended for the regular season for a domestic violence charge.
Oh, I had no idea of that even.
He's in jail for, so I mean he is he's eligible to pitch in the postseason, but he won't be pitching in the regular season. He's I think in court right now.
Yeah.
For domestic violence. So not great, but yeah, I mean that's one thing that they kind of needed. Who was there? Giles. Ken Giles was their closer. I believe they actually traded him in that deal to Toronto. I had to check that, but I think that's right. So I think they're kind of banking on. Obviously, they're another one of those teams that's going to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of while the A's are pushing in the West, the Mariners are still there. It's the Astros division to lose. They're the world champions. If you want it, you got to go take it from them. So they didn't do a whole lot. They in this. I mean, they went. I think the only one you sent to me was they went and got Osuna, and I can't think of any other major league moves that they made. So, like I said, they're another team that kind of knows they're going to make the playoffs anyway. So, and they've got a lot of really good contracts, really club-friendly, long-controlled contracts that they can kind of lean on and compete for a long time. So.
Yeah, so you gave your some winners and losers, and I noticed most of them were in the AL. So I'll put mine in the NL. So right off the bat, you said the Dodgers. Dodgers are a no-brainer. You get Machado and Dozier. That's huge. My second winner is probably the Milwaukee Brewers. I think Moustakas and Scope, you said?
John Scope.
Are two pretty good bats to have in the lineup. I'm not sure what kind of a year Moustakas is having, but I'm pretty sure Scope was hitting pretty well last I checked.
Yeah. He's having a good year, and like I said, it plugged some holes that they needed. So,
and I think Scope still has 3 or 2 years left.
So yeah,
before becoming a free agent.
This is at the end of this year, but Scope, I believe, has at least a couple more years left.
And they needed a guy like him. I was asking my brother the other day. We were watching the Reds, and we were talking about Scooter Gennett, who used to play for the Brewers, and I said, how much do you want to bet that they regret getting rid of Scooter now that he's, having an all-star caliber year? He said, I really don't think they care. They're doing well. But they needed a guy like Gennett, and Scope is that kind of guy. He's a good hitter.
Yeah, he's a major league. He's a veteran hitter. He kind of will probably slot low on the low end of that order, which kind of tells you all you need to know about it, about that batting, about that lineup. So it'll be interesting to watch. Like I said, the Brewers are in the thick of of a division race with Chicago. So it'll be interesting to kind of watch how Moustakas and Scope, how Craig Counsell plays with Eric Thames and Travis Shaw and Jesus Aguilar, who's kind of cooled down a little bit from that torrid start he got off to. It'll be interesting to kind of see how that, because they've got 6 infielders for 4 spots right now.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to kind of see how he plays that.
Another winner I have is the Philadelphia Phillies. I really like what they did. They needed a bat. They got Wilson Ramos. And like you mentioned, they're a very, very, very young team. And so they could use some veteran leadership. They go out and get Asdrubal Cabrera, who also has a pretty good bat. So I like what they did there. I really like them, actually, to kind of maybe win the NL East. Last I checked, they were winning leading the division. Yeah,
they're a half game up on the Braves right now, so they're in the division lead. Like I said, it'll be interesting that those 3 in the East, Phillies, Braves, and the Nats, kind of down to the wire. That'll be a fun one to watch. But they made moves that they needed to make to compete this year, because they were one of those teams that was kind of looking at probably 2019 to compete, and then they convinced Jake Arrieta to come.
Yep.
And then they were like, well, maybe we can put together something, and
kind of like the Pirates, they've just got hot
maybe we can put something together and compete this year.
Yep.
And it looks like that's what they're doing, and everybody having the year that they've been having. Aaron Nola is throwing the absolute piss out of the ball. Rhys Hoskins is solidified himself in the middle of that order as a big bopper. Like I've been saying, Herrera and some other guys in that lineup. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but the other folks in that lineup have really put the pressure on the Phillies front office to say, hey, we want to compete. We want to compete now. So it'll be interesting to watch for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Really, my last real winner is probably the Pittsburgh Pirates. Going out and getting Chris Archer, and not even a rental. They're going to have him maybe another 2 to 3 years. I think it's huge. They needed an arm. Like I just said, they're kind of just a team who this was supposed to be a rebuilding year, and here they are, like 3 or 4 games above 500. They're insanely hot the last few weeks. Like, hell, let's go out and get a guy. We're right in this playoff push. Might as well. So I applaud them for doing it.
Yeah, they caught her at the right time, and a move that not only sets them up for maybe a push at a wild card spot, but sets them up for the next 2 or 3 years.
I agree.
So
some losers. I agree with you. I'm not a huge fan of what the Boston Red Sox did. They didn't really need to do anything, but I feel like he needed to do more than just get Ian Kinsler. He's not going to start. He gives you some depth, I guess, but I'm not sure what kind of an impact he's going to make. Like you said, I think they needed bullpen help.
Yeah, I think you gotta make a move if you're Boston. I think solidifying yourself at the top of the league is important. And they didn't do that. Like I said, they're going to be fine. They're going to make the playoffs in some form or capacity.
Yeah.
But getting some help might not have been the worst thing in the world.
Trying to find some other losers here. Indians are a good one. I'll say the Cubs. I'm not sure Cole Hamels is enough. He's got a great reputation, but he's having a terrible year.
Yeah, that was one I kind of toyed with. I toyed with the Cubs, and then the Cardinals I could talk about for a year and how they didn't do what was needed to please the fan base, but it's another topic for another day. The Cubs, like I said, they have a lineup that that they really didn't need any help with.
Yeah.
What they needed was pitching. I mean, go out and get Cole Hamels. He was a middle of the market arm. It didn't cost them all that much.
It's a great gamble. I love the move. I mean, but I feel like you needed more and maybe get one more guy.
Yeah, the problem was there just wasn't a whole lot after Archer.
Yeah.
Until like very late in the window, there wasn't a whole lot of starting pitchers on the market, and that was one they identified and said, let's roll the dice. Like I said, he's a veteran presence, and he can help in the middle of that order behind Lester and Hendricks, but like I said, maybe one or two more arms they would have kind of flipped the script and been on the winner's side of it. But they just go get Hamels, and we'll see how it goes. But it'll be interesting how he kind of fits into Joe Madden's club there.
I agree. One more team. I'm not calling them a loser. I'm not calling them a winner. One team that just stayed in the middle, if there is a such thing, was the Atlanta Braves. They made a lot of moves. They got Kevin Gausman and Darren O'Day from the Orioles, and then they gambled a little bit and got Adam Duvall from the Reds. He's a former All-Star. He's a decent bat when he's hot. The problem is he hasn't been able to get it going this year. And Gausman has had some good years. O'Day's had some good years, but maybe their best days are behind them. So, have they improved? Probably. All three of these guys just feel like guys who just needed a change of scenery. Maybe they flourish in Atlanta. But they didn't really get worse. Didn't really get a ton better. Honestly, they just got some veterans, and they're another team that's very young.
Yeah. That's one thing that they kind of gel with Freddie in that clubhouse. Like you said, it's. I wouldn't classify them as a winner. I wouldn't classify them really as a loser.
Yeah.
They have a core that they did not want to mess up.
Yeah.
They've got the Freddie, the Nick Markakis, Ronald Acuna, and Ozzie Albies with Julio Teheran on the mound. Some other young guys, and they really wanted to keep that core together because they feel like that core is going to be their centerpiece for a long time. Maybe not Markakis, but at least Freddie, Acuna, Albies, Teheran, and they've got just a ridiculous amount of arms in the system that they can lean on. So it's not surprising that they didn't make a whole lot of moves. If they needed one thing, it may have been an impact bat to kind of slot in behind Freeman and Acuna and Markakis.
Yeah, I agree. Having a guy like Adrian Beltre, I think, would have been really good for them.
Yeah, that would have been a good move. It maybe would have cost them a little bit more than they wanted to give up, especially for a guy that's on the downside of his career. I mean, Adrian Beltre is a future Hall of Famer, no doubt.
Yeah.
But he is on the backside of his career, and is still pretty valuable. I don't know if the Braves would have wanted to give up that type of value for a rental of an aging superstar. So you kind of come to
lost him again.
From Donaldson, even Mike Moustakas, and you kind of filter down a little bit, and here's Adam Duvall. So, like I said, we'll see how it kind of plays out. It's not a bad move. It's not a blow your socks off great move. It's just a move. They probably got better with the move, but it's not. They didn't really blow your socks off and say we're doubling down.
Yeah.
To compete for a World Series this year.
I will say this: I feel like they gave up way too much for Duvall, a dude who's hitting around 200, and if that's another winner, I'll throw them in there. And I'm not just saying this as a homer. I think it's the Cincinnati Reds. They traded away a dude who's hitting about 200, and they get 3 MLB players for him. I don't know much about the players they got, but still, I mean, those are dudes who can play right now.
Yeah, and they'll help a lot just with depth for Cincinnati. And so that was big for Cincinnati as a team that's – and the Rays kind of did this a little bit too. Like I said, they're not really competing, but they're not really not competing. And the Reds have kind of played themselves into that spot this year with the tear that they went on.
Yeah.
And, it'll help for the future. I think it'll help the Reds.
I agree.
So you kind of take the good with the bad. You lose Duvall, but you get 3 MLB-ready prospects or 3 MLB players with MLB service time.
Yep.
So, it's something that will be – I think it's mutually beneficial. I agree. You don't see a lot lately. You don't see a really mutually beneficial trade. It's almost kind of lopsided for one team or the other. But I think especially the Duvall trade was pretty mutually beneficial.
Well, all right, my man. That is our trade deadline breakdown. We have kept this, I said fairly short. We went about almost an hour, roughly less than 54 minutes. But, hey, every single video I've had with you has to have been at least an hour and a half. So this is considerable progress.
Considerable progress. I talk too much, and I just love baseball that much.
Yep.
So we're making progress. We'll get there.
Yeah,
eventually.
Absolutely. All right, so
Maybe
deadline has passed.
We'll get to 30 minutes.
Yeah, deadline has passed. I'm sure I will have you on maybe one more point before the playoffs start. There is another kind of trade deadline. It's not as popular as this one. Maybe if a big name or two gets moved, I'll have you on.
Sounds good, brother, man.
Sounds good. Again, I love the jersey. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, brother. Sounds good. Good to have you, or good to be on.
Yep,
Thanks
absolutely.
We
need to get ready for fantasy football. We were talking about it today in the group text. Got to do mock drafts, prepare for the draft, all that stuff. All right, man. Take care.
Take it easy.
Yep, later.